hot.
Okay.
You're ready to go.
So the first question is just your name and how you describe yourself as what we would say your occupation.
Oh, Martha Clyde, and I'm retired. Well, I guess I wouldn't say retired. I'm a widow, and I keep moving my head. I shouldn't do that.
No, your head is okay. It's your body that if you move.
Oh.
Yeah, if your head is
And well, let's see. What more can you say? I'm interested in. I used to be an artist, but I'm no longer active in the art world. But I was very, and so I consider that one of my accomplishments. Be in all the art shows all over the country, and now I just mostly, well, can't think of what one of the volunteer jobs I do here is tell people they have packages, because they say, oh, I didn't expect a package, so they never look. And so that's one of my volunteer hours. We had to write our hours that we volunteer in this facility. This is a retirement place, and so we all have to volunteer different things.
Okay, so looking back to 1969, how old were you, and what were you doing at the time? In other words, what was your life?
Well, I was
about?
born in 17. I'm not very good at figuring out how old I was.
1752.
Whatever that is.
Uh-huh.
And
So in 1969, you say.
I was in 1969. I was 52, and what else did you ask me?
Well, you were married to George Clyde.
Yes, I was married to my George Clyde, and he was on the Board of Supervisors, Santa Barbara Board of Supervisors, and so he had to cope with the oil spill.
Can you say that again, as in one whole sentence? In 1969, I was 52, and I was married to.
Oh.
Okay.
In 1969, I was 52, and I was married to George Clyde, who was on the Board of Supervisors, and was there when had to cope with the oil spill problems.
Do you remember where you were and how you first became aware that the spill was happening?
Yes, we lived at Miramar Beach, and right on the beach, well, there was a lawn, but so let me think, how did I know? But all I know is when it did happen, the beach was covered with oil, and everything was covered with oil, and the smell was so terrible at our house that I think we moved. I'm not sure if we moved out for a while, because the smell of the oil was so strong coming into our house, and of course saw all the dead birds and on the beach, and then they hired jailers from the county jail to come to try and rake up the straw. Oh, first they put straw down to absorb the oil, and then they hired, the jailers came with their yellow uniforms and raked up where the straw and put it in some sort of containers to take away to the dump. And so that was a big job. And then we went down to the harbor and saw all the boats were covered with tar and all the breakwater boulders, and oh, it was just so sad. And the smell of that oil was so terrible. And it really stopped the waves in front of our house because the oil was so thick that waves couldn't form and break. And the birds, oh, that was so sad, seeing all the birds covered with oil. And now what else?
So tell me how you felt,
Oh, just sick about it. It was just the most terrible event to see, and we were right there seeing it every day and night. And whereas the people up above that weren't on the beach weren't as aware of, that weren't affected by it, then it was just a news story for them. But at the beach, it was just terrible.
And you told me that someone important came to visit. Your husband.
Came to.
Tell us a story about President Nixon coming to visit.
Oh, yes. He.
We'll start with President Nixon.
President Nixon came, but that was not right away. We were upset that he and the Congress weren't as upset about it as we felt they should have been, and so finally Nixon came. I think George may have talked to him or called and said, somebody's got to come out here and see this because we're going to have to get help for money for cleanup and all from Congress. And so Nixon finally came and went down to West Beach, and I have the picture there in the news press, and with my husband was in the picture too, and several other people that were important in the local politics, and then he went back, and my husband went back to Washington to testify about how much help we needed from the government for the cleanup and the cost of it. And also, that was when the environmental group GOO was formed. Well, I'm not sure when GOO was formed, but I had friends who were very active and started to when they went back to Washington to get them to realize that we had to do something about the oil derricks to stop them from spilling.
Were you involved in the in any of the cleanup activities or with the birds or anything?
No. I don't think that was just impossible. I don't know how they did do that. I don't remember now how. Out at the zoo, they had a cleanup place. I mean, they do clean birds and things there, and there's another group that does that too. But I'm not sure. I wasn't involved in that.
Mm-hmm. And then, in the years, or from the months to the years afterwards, were you involved, or was your husband involved in any of the activism that developed in Santa Barbara?
I can't remember. I don't think he was much as involved as Louis Seidenberg and Bud Bottoms. They went out on a boat to try and keep them from drilling more, and she was very active, and nobody wanted to deal with her. She was such a troublemaker, and and but I don't think George had to deal with all the other county issues when he was supervisor. So, and I would go with him to all the meetings in Carpinteria and all around that he was his district, and go. They had a lot. Now they send a helper out. They don't go in person, the supervisors, the way they used to. In those days, he would go to all. He didn't have a assistant the way they do now, so he would go himself. And he enjoyed going to the different communities and meeting with them.
In the years that were kind of very close by there was an effort statewide to pass a proposition called Prop 20 to create the Coastal Act. Do you remember that?
No, I don't remember.
That campaign? You don't
No,
remember that campaign?
some of my memory's not so good anymore. I'm sure I knew about it then.
But from what you remember, how long did it take for things to come back kind of to normal?
I was in May. It would stop and then it would come back again, and it was a long time, at least a year that the beach would be have different stages of it coming in again. See, it was out there, and then it would come in again, and then it would go out, and we wouldn't have it for a while, and it took a long time.
And you described how it was, what happened with your feet.
Oh yes, originally they said, oh well, there's always been oil on the beach, at tar, and I said yes, but it was just shiny blobs that you could walk on the beach and avoid them, and then after they put the dispersant in, they were tiny little pieces, and you couldn't see them really to avoid them. You couldn't walk on the beach without getting it all over your shoes, so we all had kerosene to clean off our shoes, but if we walked on the beach, they would always be covered with tar, with this new tiny little pieces on the beach, and they were all over, so you couldn't avoid them, whereas the original tar you could avoid. It wasn't all continuous, it was just in spots.
How long did that last? And start the experience of not being able to walk on the beach without.
I think it's almost still true. You don't find the original blobs of tar anymore on the beach, and if there is anything, it's those little pieces still, and that comes from there's an oil well out on the coast, up the coast by the UCSB, and they're talking about putting more now, and so there's still spills now and then, and they say, oh well, they don't last long and don't worry about them, but it's still an iffy proposition to put an oil well that won't have some spill or effect.
Yes. How would you say the 1969 Santa Barbara oil spill affected your life?
Oh, greatly, greatly. It was just a day in history that we'll always remember, that spill, because of well, the President of the United States coming out, and it was just a day in history that that people would interview us about it, and it was just a major event in our lives.
Did it change the way you think about the environment?
Oh yes, that started the environmental movement. Before that, there wasn't any. You can move that.
You're fine. Just
No, okay. And it started the environmental movement, and which was, let's see, I knew the people. I think it was Lois Seidenberg that started it, and they were very much involved with keep oil out, and they started that environmental, and that really started it. And there was the environmental, what's it called, council, environmental. They're still active, and that, and it grew to Hillary Hauser was one of them, and she's involved with cleaning the creeks now, keeping the creeks clean, and well, the whole environmental movement started after that. There wasn't any interest before that.
Do you feel like you're part of the movement?
Well, I wasn't politically going to the groups and things. No, I wouldn't say that. I was just interested and backed them and gave money to them.
What, in your opinion, today are the greatest threats to the California coastline?
Well, well, the surge, I was so worried about the earthquake surge, and that, if it really comes to Santa Barbara, that's one thing I really worry about, is an earthquake, which we've had very bad earthquakes, and let's see, it was 1903, was it, that there was a terrible earthquake here. And the surge could come all the way for several miles up to the bird refuge and inwards, because really all that's been built up in the lower side of Santa Barbara was all a slough once, and they filled it and built buildings on it. But it really is a great big lake, almost going up to the high school, quite a ways up. So a big surge, an earthquake, would really go all the way halfway through the town. So that really worries me. Earthquake, all the time I worry about earthquakes, and what I'll do, I've planned in here to go under the table, and in my bedroom there's nowhere to go, so I'm just going to cover my head with blankets and let her roll.
What advice do you have for young people with regard to the environment and with regard to the coast, protecting the coast?
Well,
in other words, let me rephrase it. What advice do you have to young people in this area with regard to keeping Santa Barbara as beautiful and, as it has been?
Well, elect city councilmen that are interested in it. That has been very important, and on the board of supervisors too, people who are interested in that, and sometimes they aren't.
That's a really important statement. So could you say that again? It's important for young people to know that they need to elect.
Yes. It's important for young people to realize that they must elect and people in the different political roles that are interested in the environment.
I'm going to have you say it once more.
Yes, I can.
Okay.
How do I say it? You tell me.
Go ahead.
It's important for young people to elect public officials that care as much about the coast as they do.
Oh, that's good.
It's important for young people
It's
to,
important.
to elect public officials who care as much about the coast as they do.
It's important to elect, for young people, it's important to elect public officials who care much about the environment as they do.
Okay, one more time.
One more time.
It's a,
It's important
It's
for young
impor-
people to elect
It-
public officials who care as much about the coast as they do.
it's important to elect public officials who care as much about the coast as they do.
That's good. And if you were asked to head up a blue ribbon commission,
No,
protect the coast,
no longer. I'm no longer interested because I'm too old to get.
but we're playing pretend here.
Okay.
We're playing pretend. Don't pretend you were 50 years old again. And if you were, the time machine went backwards.
Oh.
And they appointed you to the county commission instead of
Oh,
your husband.
no.
What would you do?
I always led from second place. I would not. I never was good at that sort of thing. That's why I married my husband. He was so good at those taking active roles.
All right. Well, what we're going to do now is we're going to switch up some things, and we're going to give your husband a voice, okay? Janet and I are going to change places, and I'm going to ask you a different set of questions about how your husband would think.
Okay.
You ready for that?
Hope so.
Okay. So let me just make some quick changes here. Camera is still hot. And do you need to wear your glasses?
No.
Let's take those off. What I want to do here, I'm going to move this just over to the side because it's caught under your arm. If you could just hold that right there. And count to 3 for Janet.
1, 2, 3.
Good? All right. Martha, tell me your name and what your relationship to George was.
My name was Martha Knight, and then I married George Clyde, and he was my husband.
Thinking back to 1969, what was George doing at the time?
He was on the Board of Supervisors. He'd been elected in '64 to the Board of Supervisors, which he was very pleased to do.
Tell me about the day you walked out of your house, looked out at your beach and saw it covered with oil. How did that make you feel?
Oh, well, of course, it was just terrible, just terrible. But even worse was the smell. Oh, it was so terrible. And I just thought, and saw the dead birds and the whole thing, and I thought, this is just beyond comprehension. What can we do?
And when George came home that night, what did he tell you about what he thought about all of this?
Well, the same thing. He just was, he thought, oh, this is terrible. We'll have to do something about it. I'll have to see if I can get the president interested in this problem.
In the days immediately after the spill, he was probably pretty busy. What kinds of things was he doing?
Oh dear, let's see. He was, I just don't know. Just whatever the board, making resolutions and getting help to come down and clean the beach. They had to get the prisoners to come, and he was involved in seeing who could help clean up and what they could do about all the dead birds. He was involved in getting somebody that could do that sort of thing.
he was a public official, so it was very difficult for him to be active. You know, an act in a sense, an
Oh, yes.
environmental activist. But being a public official, he had a lot of power and responsibility to change things. How did he feel about environmental change? What, you know, as a public official?
Well, he felt it was very important, and that a lot of other politicians were not and did not, because their money was in with the oil companies. They were sympathetic to the oil companies and what they were going to lose in this, and he didn't want any, and they didn't want anything to be law against building more platforms.
What made him think about bringing President Nixon to the area?
Because that would emphasize that it was a national problem, and that they needed help, and political help of the government to make laws about the environment.
Did George ever tell you how he felt about the visit from President Nixon?
Oh, I'm sure he did. I'm sure he was very pleased that he could come and emphasize, and the picture was on the news and in the paper of Nixon on the beach and with George.
How did President Nixon's visit change the situation?
Well, when he went back, he was more aware of laws that must be passed, and to emphasize that, George went back to Washington, and